right. Well, good evening, everyone. As Lloyd mentioned, I'm Karen Morford. I'm a reporter with CBS Colorado here in the Denver metro area, and my focus is on Jefferson County. I'm also an investigative reporter for CBS Colorado. It's kind of a new role that I'm getting into, and really looking forward to digging into some of the issues in Colorado. At this time, I'd like to introduce your candidates for Colorado House District 30. At the end of the introduction, the audience will have one opportunity to applaud all of the candidates, after which we'll ask for silence from those in the room other than the person speaking. So ladies and gentlemen, in alphabetical order by last name, your candidates are Kyra, deGruy, Kennedy, and I'm going to go ahead and read just a brief bio on these women. Starting with Kyra. Kyra is the executive director of CoPhrive, a whole health movement working in communities across Colorado to build systems that help people furthest from power, privilege, and economic opportunities thrive. Throughout her career, Kyra, has played a critical role in the passing of more than 50 state policies. Notably, she worked on a bill that established the right to abortion in Colorado, legislation that prevents dangerous individuals from keeping firearms, and over 20 bills improving our public education system. Next, I'd like to introduce Rebekah Stewart. Rebekah also has a short bio for you here. Rebekah has served in the Lakewood City Council since 2021, is current chair of the Budget and Audit Board, and is a board-certified music therapist. She's worked as a Medicaid provider in Colorado with kids and adults in the disability community, and has written and published several research studies in collaboration with UCH. In the summer, you can find Rebekah wherever the nearest body of water is. She and her husband Logan live in Lakewood and love antique shopping and spending time with their grandchildren. So we'll go ahead and talk a little bit about the plans for tonight and how this will unfold. Each candidate will be given an opportunity to introduce themselves for 2.5 minutes, and we encourage you both to tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you see as your top priorities. After that, I will ask a series of 6 prepared questions. You each have seen those questions and have had time to prepare. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer the same question. After the question has been answered, the first candidate will then have an opportunity for a 1-minute rebuttal. I will change the order in which candidates respond as we move through those questions and finally to the closing statements. The order for the rebuttals for any question will be the same order as it was for the answers to that question. And after the last question is complete, you each be given 2 minutes for your closing statements. The debate is expected to last around 90 minutes, and we will be planning for a break. The audience then is encouraged to quietly leave if you do need to use the restroom at any time other than the midway break. I also wanted to go over just a few rules to keep things in order here. The audience is asked to refrain from applauding or making any verbal comments whatsoever during the debate. Please remember that everyone has come tonight to hear these candidates' positions on issues, not yours. Candidates are asked not to comment or interrupt each other. We have a tight timeline tonight, so answers will be timed. When you have 30 seconds remaining, we have a timer here that will let you know, and then also let you know when it is time to close. It indicates your time is up and you need to answer promptly. All right. Next, we'll go ahead and start with your introductions. Go ahead and start. I think we decided you would go first with the coin toss.
I'm Kyra, deGruy, Kennedy. Thank you all so much for coming tonight. I know that folks are really struggling to pay attention to what's happening in our world and in our country right now, and for good reason, because it is an objectively dark time. And I've often been struck in the now 10 years of policy work that I've been doing by how much power we build when we come together and the incredible amount of change that we're able to do when we have a shared vision. So it's really, it's empowering to see you all here tonight. As many of y'all know, I was a victim of a violent sexual trauma as a kid, and that led to suicide attempts and substance use issues and periods of homelessness. And when I got my life together, thanks to my incredible family who are here, the trajectory of my life got laser focused on helping others and on changing our systems. And I worked in a primary care clinic for, my patient load were all type 2 diabetics who were either uninsured or on Medicaid. And because we had grant funding, I could treat their social health needs in addition to their physical health needs. And so they were getting better every single week. And when we ran out of grant funding, the heartbreak of losing those patients pushed me into larger system reform. So in 2014, I started working for a federal health policy nonprofit, and for the past 7 years, I've been working at the Colorado State Capitol in partnership with legislators, drafting bills, organizing young folks, and training them on how to get involved in the political process, lobbying for good bills and against bad bills. And so I have a very clear understanding of what this job is and how complicated it is. And how many years it takes to build the kind of trust that you need to build in that building to be effective and to know who to lean on and who not to lean on. I think right now we need a legislature that's ready to take action on day one, just like we did in 2021 when Roe v. Wade was overturned. You know, I was running one of the organizations that was part of the small coalition that came together to draft and pass the Reproductive Health Equity Act, which codified abortion in our state. And we need a legislature that's ready to do exactly the same thing on day one with our climate change crisis and our education system and our gun violence epidemic. And I've been doing this work for a really long time, so I know how to be effective in the building, and I have a very clear vision and know the action steps that need to be taken to be able to build a Colorado where every person, regardless of your socioeconomic status or your zip code, have the opportunity to thrive. And so I do hope that that by the end of today, you'll decide that I'm the candidate that we need to elect in order to get that vision done. So thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And Rebekah Stewart, you are up next.
Hi everyone, my name is Rebekah Stewart. I'm here asking for your support because I think we can all agree we're facing one of the most consequential elections of our lifetime. The Supreme Court has stripped away the rights of millions of American women. My parents really inspired who I am and why I have spent my life fighting for people who are falling through the cracks. They were addiction counselors, and like many essential mental health professionals, they spent their careers undervalued and underpaid in a failing system that put my family at the brink of homelessness. Even though we struggled though, our community stepped up, and it's really why I'm a Democrat, it's why I'm a therapist, it's why I'm your city councilor, and it's why I'm stepping up to be your state representative. As a therapist, I've seen firsthand the impacts on kids who are growing up in a state that has failed to prioritize mental health services. Suicide is one of the leading causes of death for kids in Colorado, and guns are the leading cause of death for kids across the country. And we need to do better. We need to double down on mental health supports for kids and make sure that we're doing everything that we can to keep weapons of war out of the hands of civilians. Climate change is one of the most important and impactful things that our kids are going to be facing in the next generation. Whether or not we're going to be able to live and thrive in the state is going to depend on our ability to move off of our reliance on fossil fuels. I've done this work as your city councilor, drawing down state and federal dollars to support our clean air and water, and I'll continue to do that at the state. Housing affordability has and will continue to be one of the most important issues to me. You know, seniors are unable to downsize. Homeownership is out of reach for so many people. So many families are living on the streets because of how unaffordable it is, and we have to do better. We need to take statewide action. I hope that I have proven to you that I will work tirelessly for you at the state capitol, and if I'm lucky enough to be your Democratic nominee, I will never stop fighting with you and for you. Thank you.
All right, thank you both so much. We'll go ahead and jump into tonight's questions, and I think we're going to begin, and Lloyd is ready with some slides that he has organized to prepare us for this first question.
Not get a second one for those who are earlier. This is from Mr. demographic. And this, how about you one for here from Sarah? So we have a new, as I said earlier, area here in the context of the metro.
We can't hear you. We can't hear you.
I'm working on it.
Yes, so in the context of the metro, we have 100 seats, 35 are in the U.S. Senate, or not the U.S., Colorado Senate. We'd like to be in the U.S. Senate. And we have 65 in the House. You can see here the concentration after redistricting, which has been every 10 years, has made Lakewood and Edgewater, as we normally are, kind of at the center of the action. Here's House District 30. And you can see Denver's quite intense population, older, etc. And we get further out, the districts get larger. We'll ask the candidates here in a second what they think of this totality in the district. And one of the, I think, interesting points, as you can see, in the handout, we're talking the district size. There it goes. So the candidates can tell you, we pretty much, sorry guys, we're going to tell you what this city looks like in some key demographics from the U.S. Census Bureau. Many of you know this. As we get into much of the Jefferson County area, as we go west, it becomes more and more heavily populated by single-family residents of higher income, and folks that are not quite suburban, because we love it here, but folks that are looking for not that downtown Denver hustle and bustle, or maybe the traffic from Aurora. Our per capita income in the city is $50,636 as of 2 years ago, about $51,000 per home, $86,000, a good hefty amount. Poverty in Lakewood is about 8.5%. In Colorado, it's higher at 9.4%. Transportation to work, how many people here are taking a drive into probably down 27 minutes to work? And fortunately, we have a strong number of independent households, 68,616. A nice ratio there of two people per household.
All right, based on those slides, I'm going to go ahead and move into asking you both. With such a diverse makeup in House District 30 in Edgewater and Lakewood, how will you seek to represent competing community priorities as a state representative? And Rebekah Stewart did win the coin toss backstage, so you will have 2 minutes to answer, and then we'll move to Ms. Kennedy.
Great, thank you. You know, I actually am not of the mind that we have competing priorities. You know, all of us want to have the opportunity to thrive and live a good life. I think having represented Lakewood for the last several years and actually represent a district in Lakewood that looks very, very similar to the whole of House District 30, have had the opportunity to talk to a lot of residents, and we have a really kind, wonderful district full of wonderful people who really care about making sure that everyone has a fair shot. And you know, we want to live in a good community that is safe and where everyone has opportunities to live and work. And so I don't really see there being competing priorities. We may have different solutions for getting where we all want to go. And that is really, I think, the trick of governing. You know, our campaign has knocked on over 10,000 doors already in this district, and one of the best ways to get to know our residents and the needs of people is to go out to their door and ask them. So I'm really proud of the work that we have done in this campaign, but the opportunity that I've had to represent this district on the Lakewood City Council as well. Because of that, I have been able to build relationships with local elected officials in both municipalities and have a great deal of support on both of those city councils. And so I really look forward to taking that experience that I have serving our community in that way and those relationships that I've built to, I think, be a better representative of the needs of our very diverse community at the state.
So our district is the most diverse district in all of Jefferson County. And so being asked this question is really important since we're both very clearly white women in an economically and racially diverse district. You know, my journey to understand equity and the inequities that are inherent within our system started really early. In part because of the trauma that I previously mentioned. But you know, in my pretty early teenage years, I was learning a lot about classism and racism and and my own privilege and how to kind of talk about it and understand it and see it in the lens of the people who have lived in my life. And frankly, that lens has been the lens that I've used for my entire career for how I've done policy work. When I was directing the work at Young Invincibles, which is a policy and advocacy organization that I ran for several years, the way that we built our policy agenda was by listening very, very, very deeply to the people who have lived experience and then building a policy agenda in partnership with them to actually meet the needs of them. And using my privilege as a white woman to make that happen when there were barriers for folks. There is a lot that we can do and have been doing at the state level to level the playing field between both socioeconomic status and racial inequity. And I agree that we all want affordable health care, and we all want our kids to be safe from gun violence, and we all want a good education system, and we all need to protect rising wages and support workers. I agree with that. And I think people experience their life very, very, very differently depending on their socioeconomic status and the way that they show up racially. And it's very important for us to be stewards of that and understand that very deeply and understand our relationship with that inequity and how to show up as more than just an ally. I have been doing this work for a lot of years, and so I've seen a lot of new legislators jump into the space with a lot of great ideas without spending the time to do trust-based work and understand, to properly diagnose the problems before we try to start solving them. And right now, our equity issues are problematic, and we need folks who are really, really gonna dig into this work in partnership with communities of color and folks that are struggling economically.
Okay, Ms. Stewart, you had a 1-minute rebuttal if you would like.
Sure. I agree with a lot of what has been said, and I think, again, the best way to be in our community and actually hear and stakeholders what folks in our communities want is to show up for them. To show up in spaces and to be able to make sure that we're listening to folks in all sorts of different spaces. I've been a really active member in our Jefferson County Democratic Latino Initiative. It's not a space that I just show up in when I'm running for office. It's a space that I want to make sure I am there, I am learning, and I'm taking that and I'm advocating for a community then as a city councilor and an elected official. And that's something that I'm very, very committed to continuing to doing at the state.
On to our next question. While there has been significant movement in improving mental health care access in Colorado, specifically following the pandemic, a recent survey from Colorado Health Institute found that roughly 17% of Coloradans could not get the mental health care that they needed in 2023. Do you believe our state is doing enough to address mental health concerns? What do you see as the biggest and most significant barrier into accessing mental health, and what can we do better? We're going to go ahead and start with you, since you had the last question.
So I see our mental health crisis, and frankly, many of our systems level crises, as having two main bodies of work, right? The first is the acute things that need to happen right now because people are struggling in our communities. And then the second is the big systems level reform work. And for me, I've been working in both levels of that in this space, in the mental health space, for a lot of years in Colorado. And in the immediate mental illness and people who are dealing with substance use issues. So we have these problems, and I have been in these trenches working on it for a lot of years. I played a major role in the bill that passed, created an insurance mandate to require mental health coverage an annual mental health visit in the same way that we do an annual physical health visit. And we worked on the program, the I Matter program, that created free mental health coverage for kiddos in our communities. And it's why I've been endorsed by almost all of the mental health champions in the legislature. But a major part of our problem here is that the healthcare interests fight us tooth and nail every single moment of the way. It is obscene being in the lobby and dealing with the special interests lobby. And frankly, our governor's been pretty squirrely about insurance mandates as well. So, we have to work on that as well. We did work on the creation of the new Behavioral Health Administration, and I do have a lot of hope for what that department is going to bring once we figure out the regions and start getting the grant funding that we have allocated into the BHA out into communities. But for me, the problem is a systems level problem. So like there's a whole bunch of stuff we're doing that we're actively doing to try to get at the acute problems. But what we're really talking about here is the systems level problem. And mental health is just one part, though a very important part, of what helps us thrive. And the work that I do for my job every day here in Jefferson County and across our state is to build resilient communities that put the person in the center and surround them with all of the things that they need in order to thrive, while saving money for our taxpayer systems. And so I think we desperately need leaders in the legislature who understand both how to do the immediate work and who have a clear vision of the systems level changes that we need in order to actually fix this problem.
All right, go ahead, Rebekah, you have 2 minutes.
You know, we're doing a lot, but we clearly need to do more. I've been a Medicaid provider actually for over 10 years in Colorado, so I've been a recipient of those abysmal reimbursement rates myself, and there are so many providers who are leaving the field, not just the mental health providers, but healthcare providers all over the state who are leaving the field because we can't afford to do the work that we do, that we are passionate about, and to be able to make a living in Colorado. You know, on the city council, we've created and increased mental health provider supports all across the city. We've actually created new mental health co-responder positions in the city. Those are things that we're doing right here and right now. And as a therapist myself, this is an area that I really hope that I can bring some creative solutions and some creative problem solving, both as a clinician, but also as somebody who has done a ton of advocacy work for both of my clients, as well as for providers, you know, advocating for increased wages and pay parity and access to telehealth services and things like that. It's really why I got into this work actually in the first place, was doing that work as a clinician myself. One thing that we need to do is we need to make sure that we are increasing mental health care providers in schools. Right now, our Colorado schools have a ratio of 1 mental health provider to every 1,500 students. That is 3 times the recommended number, and any mental health care provider would tell you that they would much rather have a ratio of about 1 school counselor or school social worker to 250 kids, and we are far, far away from that. So I'm really, really excited and committed to doing everything that we can to increase the amount of providers who are in our schools, so we're meeting kids where they're at and making sure that nobody falls through the cracks.
You have the opportunity for a 1-minute rebuttal if you'd like.
Not a rebuttal, I agree. I think that what's tricky here is, you know, we're going to talk about taxes in a little bit, so I'm not going to go too crazy, but what's tricky when we say we need to increase, and we need an increase in providers, and we need an increase in school-based counselors, and we need an increase in culturally competent providers. I mean, we have a huge gap of culturally competent mental health providers. There's like a handful of Latino and Black providers in our state, and folks are struggling to get in. So like we do have a huge shortage, and we have, you know, in my work at Young Invincibles, we have worked on a number of the bills that increased pipeline for folks working in mental health, and reduced, you know, tuition costs, and did buyback. You know, we've done a lot of stuff to try to increase, but again, the problem is when we're talking about Medicaid, when we're talking about state level funding, we have a budget crisis because we have an unfair tax system. And until we deal with our unfair tax system, we can't just add new counselors. And that's like, you know, it's not that we don't want to, it's not that we're not trying to, it's that we literally cannot. So we need folks to be thinking really holistically about how to actually solve this problem.
All right, question number 3. Along with the high costs in healthcare and mental health care, recent polling shows that Coloradans are worried about the high cost of living in general, with housing among some of their top concerns. How, if elected as state representative, how can you make sure that HD30 residents can maintain or obtain affordable housing? And we'll go ahead and start with Rebekah.
You know, what makes housing affordable looks very different to a lot of different people, which is why it takes a really holistic and multifaceted approach to address our affordable housing crisis here in Colorado. On the Lakewood City Council, we have done so many things that I'm really proud of that I've helped to spearhead. We've reduced permitting barriers for affordable housing. We have made the most significant investment in housing and homelessness services in our city's history in last year's budget. We reduced our mill levy this year because people are feeling the pain from their property taxes being increased. And these are the types of responses that it's really going to take for all of us to continue to address this. I think that one of the things that I look forward to bringing to the table is experience collaborating with so many different organizations, across governmental entities. These are the types of partnerships that we need to really tackle a lot of these issues head on. But it is disingenuous to talk about our housing affordability crisis without talking about why we do not have more entry-level and affordable home ownership opportunities for people. This is the type of housing that people need to be able to downsize and stay in their community. This is the type of housing that young people need to be able to set down roots and build generational wealth in our community. And this is the type of housing that we are not seeing getting built in our community, and it is because of barriers at the state. And so I am very excited and willing to have those hard conversations. It is a fraught issue, but we have to do something. And it's disingenuous to talk about housing affordability if we're not going to talk about that issue.
Can you hear me? Yep, I'm on. So in my adolescence, I experienced periods of homelessness, and so I know quite innately the fear and struggle that comes with coming to the end of the month and not being able to pay my bills and not being able to pay my rent and not knowing what I'm going to do. And there's a lot that we are doing at the state level and that we can be doing to lower the cost of housing, and it includes state tax credits. We've done a ton of renter protection policies. We have been working in partnership with nonprofit entities that have extra land. We, in 2021, while I was running YI, we passed a bill that created 3 programs in the Department of Local Affairs that offered grants and scholarships to local governments to increase affordable housing. But the fact of the matter, so there's lots that's happening, right? But the fact of the matter is that we don't have enough housing. And it's not keeping up with our population growth. And we're not requiring reasonable affordability standards. And so when we say it's affordable, it's not actually affordable for most folks. Housing, like almost everything that the state government works on, is deeply connected with everything else. We worked on a bill that created the Office of Financial Empowerment a couple of years ago, which is doing all kinds of work to increase financial resilience in communities across Colorado. And I've been a part of almost all of the major healthcare reforms that have happened in the last handful of years. And what I've learned is this: when our systems are built to make money for corporations, that is what they will do. So, and many of our systems are built to make money for corporations. P.S. That's just a secret in case you didn't get that. So we need to continue to address housing and workforce and healthcare and childcare and these other acute needs that are making life unaffordable for Coloradans. Because of course we have to. That's what's in front of us. We have to do that. Folks are struggling, and it is our job as the government to help. And I will stay in the business of building new, complex adaptive systems that actually are built to help people instead of being built to make corporations money. And then our outcomes will change.
We'll go ahead and move on to the next question. Question number 4. As both unhoused citizens and new immigrants continue to put pressure on public resources and available budgets, what can the state do to assist local agencies and cities to mitigate the crisis, if anything?
The state can and should do everything possible, right, to deal with this crisis. Just like we did at the state level in funding the new navigation center right here in Lakewood. That was a state funding program that gave the funds to Lakewood in order to open that navigation system. The organization that I currently run, Co-Thrive, is working in communities across the state to help folks that are furthest from power and privilege and economic opportunities thrive by putting them in the center and wrapping them around with all the services that they need in order to truly thrive. And that is opposed to what we normally do, which is kind of throw people into a complicated web of systems, and we expect them to navigate them, and then we're mad about how much money it's costing. And one of our communities is right here in Jeffco, working with the Action Center, if you all know them. And our Mesa County community is also focused on folks who are unhoused and who are from the new migrant population. And what we're finding is that when we do things differently, when we actually meet the needs of the person that we're trying to help, it's reducing silos, saving major money to our taxpayer systems. These problems can be solved. I'm watching them be solved. I'm helping them be solved. But we have to function differently. We need to do things differently than we currently are. And we need legislators who understand housing first policies and wraparound services. Here in Lakewood, we've had a heartbreaking response to our migrant crisis with disinformation about migrants, as if people moving here takes away our quality of life. And I'm here to say, you don't have to choose. We don't have to choose between helping people, between doing the right thing, and having a good, high-quality life. It's a false choice. And I'm grateful that Lakewood councilors Isabel Cruz and Roger Lowe really pushed the council to address the racism and misinformation about our new neighbors. We say we're building an inclusive community, and that takes work. It takes the work of all of us to build it together. And so I need you guys to be here with me trying to build an inclusive community. Rebekah?
It is so clear that no city, no county, especially along the Front Range, no city or county is an island. And we need to do better working together and taking a more regional approach to a lot of these issues. I think in Lakewood, we've actually done a really fabulous job of creating some model programs and systems that really are an example of the type of good work that you can do when cities and counties and nonprofits work together to create programs that support the whole person. Our Homeless Navigation Center in Lakewood was funded, yes, by some state grants, but also by very significant investment by our local partners, our nonprofit partners, and we're doing incredible work in saving lives. We got a report last year that not a single person passed away over the winter in Lakewood that we could find because of exposure to the elements. And I think that's absolutely incredible. And it's something that I am so proud to have had a part in. And having that experience of a successful program that's actually moving the needle for real people's lives is a huge reason why I'm stepping up to run to be your state representative, because we need people with that experience working with multiple partners to actually create policy and programs that make a real difference in people's lives. So I'm really excited to be able to get to do that work. Now with our newcomer neighbors who are coming to this country, so many people are just coming here because they want to work and build a better life. And I've been talking to quite a few other candidates for state office who I hope to work with very soon, who are coming up with some really innovative ideas about how can we potentially create temporary Colorado-specific work permits for people so that they have an opportunity to earn a living and build a good life. And these are the types of things that I'm really excited to get to start working on so that we're serving everybody in our community.
All right, on to question number 5. For the first time in years, the state budget will fully fund K-12 schools by getting rid of the budget stabilization factor, and have also proposed and made additional updates to the state's funding formula. Do you agree the funding formula needs more upgrading? If so, what kind of changes would you push for? And if no, explain why.
So we should celebrate this victory. It's a very big deal that we brought down the budget stabilization factor, but we also have to be very real that this brings us up to only 1989 levels of funding, and Colorado is still very near dead last in per student funding in the state. So there is a lot more work to do. You know, I come from a long line of educators. My grandma and my aunt were able to afford to live and own a home and retire in their communities, and my brother, who is a Denver public school teacher, is not living in that same reality and in that same experience. So we need to figure out how to stop balancing our budget on the backs of our educators, and this really does start by looking at our tax system and doing everything that we can to make it more equitable, including a more equitable income tax where everybody pays their fair share. We have a flat income tax rate in Colorado right now, and any changes to that requires a vote of the people as part of TABOR. We need to look at making our tax systems more equitable, and actually we're just nibbling around the edges of what my opponent correctly diagnosed is a tax system that is not working for our state and for the needs of our state. And so we need to have leaders who are leading boldly in this area. Right now, as the chair of the Budget and Audit Board in Lakewood, we're digging in on this right now in my own city. It's a love letter to my city to be able to ask our community, what do you care about? What should we prioritize? And do you think it's worth it to pool our dollars to make sure that we're expanding and protecting parks and open space, and making sure that we're creating more walkable communities for all of our residents, and investing in wraparound services and public safety for our community. And so that's something that we're doing right now, and it's something that I'm really excited to continue to get to work on with the state.
So there actually was a major overhaul of the K-12 funding formula this legislative session, and it directed more money to students. So now money goes to the students rather than the districts. And everyone is getting more money. That doesn't mean that everyone's happy, but all the districts across the state are getting more money. But it's not even close to what we should be calling fully funding our schools. This is like laughable. I'm almost speechless by how horrifying. And I have notes, dude. It's awful. What we did do in this funding formula adjustment is we increased funding for at-risk students, for ESL, for special ed, for teachers that are actually dealing with the migrant crisis in the classrooms. And there is really important equity funding that's been built into this new funding formula. So in many ways, it is a beautiful piece of legislation. And I agree, we need a more fair tax structure because we don't have enough money in our general fund to fund our kids' educations. I've been working in education policy for a really long time and have worked on the passage of 24 bills that have been improving our education system in the last handful of years. And for me, those bills all go to the fact that I believe our public education system should be an equalizer, right? It should be the place where any kid can go and build opportunities that they aren't given at home. And where they're taught to be curious and explore and expand their minds and build community. And our teachers should be able to teach them without having to be everyone for every kid. And what we're seeing instead is an overemphasis on standardized testing and a constant fear of gun violence in our schools. And as the only candidate in this race endorsed by Everytown for gun safety and endorsed by numerous public education advocates both in our county and across the state, you can count on me to stay in this fight because I've been in it for a really long time. And for me, the stakes are personal too, because now I have a child who's a school-aged child. And I have the moments at drop-off where I give my daughter a kiss and I get in the car and I wonder if it's the last time I'm ever going to see her again. And this is not how we should have to live. We can do better and we must.
Opportunity for a 1 minute.
Yeah. School shootings and gun violence are very personal to my family and I. My husband is a survivor of the Columbine shooting, actually, and I totally agree. We have to do more. It's absolutely and utterly unacceptable that an assault weapons ban failed in the Senate this year. You know, the arguments are that it's not going to fix the problem. It's not really the solution that we need. But you know what? It's one of them, and it's worth it sometimes to just stand up and say this is the right thing, and we just have to do it. I don't think you'll find a lot of daylight between my opponent and I on this issue, to be perfectly honest with you. I think it's very personal for both of us, and thank you for bringing it up.
All right, so question number 6. I think we'll skip maybe the gun question. It seems like you both have addressed that a little bit. Number 6, we are seeing more attempts to remove some TABOR spending or revenue limits from local governments, also known as deGruy by some. Is this something that you agree with? Why or why not?
So I worked on Lakewood's 2018 deGruy, which freed up millions of dollars for investments in new parks, in infrastructure, in public safety, in our co-responder programs. And I'm proud of that work. And I was on the leadership team of the 2018 Mill and Bond, which funds our public schools still to this day. And I'm supportive of Jeffco's deGruy that they're bringing to the election this year. Because we're deeply understaffed in our child welfare system and in our social work system and in our public health investments in this county. So we need the money. But frankly, as previously mentioned, we don't have a fair tax system. And so just deGruy doesn't actually fix this problem. You know, I am committed to referring a progressive income tax to the ballot so that large corporations and people who make over $400,000 a year pay their fair share, and anyone who doesn't pays less. There are a lot of folks in our community who rely on their TABOR checks, right, who need them for their groceries, and especially in the last couple of years as we have made the refunds a lot more progressive, and we have increased tax credits for lower income families, and so I'm aware of that. We'll make sure to ensure that our lower and middle income families will still receive the benefit rather than bear the brunt of fixing our tax system, which is what they're currently doing with TABOR. What I've experienced every single legislative session that I've been down at the Capitol every year is that there is so much more work that needs to be funded than we have funding for. And we have every year at least a couple because where the legislators cry because they have to make decisions between funding education and funding mental health. And both we're trying to put co-responders or mental health providers in our schools. Like, these are decisions that legislators should not have to make. And so for me, you know, in the last 3 years, as we've been refunding billions of dollars, that is billions with a B, to taxpayers, instead of investing in chronically underfunded education system, lowering our healthcare costs, funding our mental health programs, taking major action on the climate catastrophe. You know, like, we can do better, y'all, and I have a vision and a plan to do it.
I am a firm believer in the fact that a budget is a moral document. I believe that very deeply. It's why I love digging into that kind of work on the Lakewood Budget and Audit Board. It's why I'm extraordinarily interested in serving on the Joint Budget Committee at the state capitol, because not everybody loves that work, and I do. And, you know, I totally agree. We need a more progressive income tax in our state. You know, but one thing that I know and understand that Coloradans really deeply value about some elements of our current tax system is the level of government accountability. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Quite frankly, in Lakewood, again, we are currently under a TABOR pause that has allowed us to keep about $8 million a year from sales tax revenue, and the voters told us that they wanted it invested in parks and open space acquisition and maintenance, in public safety, and in roads, sidewalks, and infrastructure. And you know what? That's exactly where all of those dollars have gone. And you can even go online and see the exact amount of money that was spent on all of these projects. And I don't think government accountability around your tax dollars is a bad thing. The government is here to be good stewards of our tax dollars, and at the state, being good stewards of our tax dollars means investing in things that are very much in the state's purview, like education funding, like healthcare. And we know that these systems, we've talked about them all night. Medicaid reimbursements are abysmal because there is no more money to reimburse healthcare providers. It has to come from somewhere. And so we have to, as a community, think about what are our priorities, what do we want from our government, and what do we want our tax dollars going towards? And we need to hold our elected officials accountable to that. That's our job.
All right. Just do a time check here. I can't actually see the clock. 6:55. I think that wraps up our time for questions, unless Lloyd is open to one more question. And then we will go to audience questions after the break. The break will last about 4 minutes, so you have time now to go to the restroom. I think we're going to be in some additional questions from the audience, and then we'll close with your statements. But for now, we have about a 4-minute break in order to go to the restroom or grab a drink.
That you submitted as a request for agenda items, which have made it to study session, first reading, second reading, or passage.
That's a great question. I have an answer. One proposal that I ran on, talked to people at the doors when I was running, was at the time that we had a 1% growth cap that had not been sunsetted, and that was the world we were living in Lakewood when I was running, and it was creating a lot of barriers for affordable housing developers because they had not been carved out. And so I very, very quickly submitted a request for council action to look at removing affordable housing developers from those a lot of red tape. And it was actually one of the best lessons I learned in collaboration with other folks who I don't always agree with as well, because I collaborated with so many city councilors who I wasn't sure we had a ton in common on this issue, and we actually were able to craft a policy that passed with an 8-3 vote, and it's something I'm really proud of.
Our next question?
Yes, hello, my name is Eric, and I just want to say I'm happy to live in this district and have 2 awesome candidates going on, so best of luck to both of you. You guys have both mentioned it in both your opening statements about climate change. What do you guys plan to do about it, or how can you help?
Go ahead, Ms. Kennedy, we'll start with you.
So protecting the environment is my #1 priority, because if we don't have an environment, then none of the other policy work that we do matters at the state level. And the climate is in crisis right now. And I do think that this is one of the places where my opponent and I have differ. I have not and will not ever take money from the oil and gas industry. And my opponent has accepted 10 donations from 10 different lobbyists for the oil and gas industry, including the worst of the worst, who lobby for the corporation Suncor refinery, which it's not just oil and gas, but it's also destroying communities of color and low-income communities, because they are disproportionately affected by oil and gas. And so I think what we actually need in this space is people who are not going to feel any pressure, conscious or subconscious, to do the favors of oil and gas. And we need people in the legislature who are going to take this very, very seriously, because it is the most serious issue that we're facing right now, in my personal opinion.
This is a great question, and it's actually something I have a voting record on as an elected official. I have led on water conservation efforts in the city of Lakewood. We have programs that support folks to be more water wise in our community and to financially support support turf replacement programs, because that was another one of the requests for cancel action that I ran on that we actually got passed. We are investing in more walkable communities and increasing, the requirements for new developments to be more sustainable in Lakewood, and these are all things that I have supported. It's unfortunate that we have gotten to the level of these types of attacks, because I also know that these types of attacks were leveled against you when you ran for city council and around developers and developer money, and it's disappointing because I think we all know that there are folks who have invested in so many different candidates who are supporting you, who you're supporting, including your husband. I would love to be able to get back to the issues and the records that we actually have on these issues.
Next up.
I'm Dave Gold from the 18 Balsam in Lakewood. I understand that Tom Sullivan opposed the assault weapon ban because he thought that if it was passed, that people would run out and buy them before it came into effect. Well, Australia solved that problem. They totally banned the ownership and possession of those weapons, and they bought back those weapons from the people who already owned them. Now, in the Capone years, machine guns were banned, and that apparently is up upheld in the courts with respect to the Second Amendment. So I think we need to have the courage and guts to propose a total ban of assault weapons in Colorado, and we will buy back, and of course that takes money, but we will buy back from the people who already own them. So we eliminate them altogether. And what do we say?
I agree. This is not a bill I would have voted against. I think we can have conversations about what other policies in tandem, and that's very often been Senator Sullivan's argument, is that we also need things like gun store licensing and other policies that I know he's been working on, but I don't think that's an excuse to do nothing.
While I was running in Invincibles, we organized testimony for the assault weapons ban both years, and had a lot of folks speak strongly in support of this bill. And I have been a member of Moms Demand Action, as I'm a mom who's demanding action. And so I am with you 100% that it is shameful that we haven't passed an assault weapons ban. And I do think, in speaking with Tom Sullivan, I think his view here is that there are a lot of other policies that will be more impactful. And I don't agree for what it's worth, but I do think, making sure that we have a registration, making sure that we have the steps that actually make it possible to enforce a ban like this is also really, really important. And we have underfunded the Gun Violence Prevention Office, and we have lost the director of that office. And so this really does need to be a state priority, so that we actually have a strategic plan that gets at this as the public health crisis that it is.
Again, if you could just introduce yourself.
My name is Max Tyler, and I used to be somebody. And I want to thank the gentleman that asked the climate question. That's really important. And that's a question I was going to ask. But it's never asked by the media, it's never in debates, and it's an existential issue of our entire time. So I'm going to ask a slightly different version of that question. In my time in the legislature, and a couple years afterwards, I worked with legislators literally from Hawaii to Connecticut, and in between, about how their chambers could do more to cut carbon. Colorado was then and is now a leader. What can you do to coordinate across the country? We're not going to solve the world's problem, but what can you do in Colorado to lead by example and make things happen for cutting carbon all across the country and legislative wherever you can?
Thank you, Max. You're still somebody in my heart, if nothing else. So I think there's a lot that is already happening and that we can build on in terms of state coalition work. The NCSL is the National Conference of State Legislatures is an organization that does a lot of research and data on figuring out what's happening across the country, and it's a resource that we have used year after year after year in order to make sure that the policies that we're passing are the best policies possible, and that we actually have some data to support what is working and what isn't working. So I think intentionally building coalitions with legislators across the country is an incredibly important part of this, and making sure that the pressure that we're putting on our federal government is joined, because when we're doing it just as state legislators, they don't listen. But if we have state legislators from across the entire country organizing around this issue, they absolutely will listen. And I will say that I think in terms of the last question around this, it is quite relevant who is supporting our campaigns, and it is quite relevant to the way that we govern. And to pretend like it is not is dishonest. And so I understand the resistance, and also this is very relevant to the way that we make decisions and how we choose to vote.
One area that Colorado is really leading, I think, already, and it is really exciting, and this program hasn't really gotten off the ground, but it was something that I worked very, very hard in the Lakewood City Council to support, to rally support, to lobby for at the state capitol a couple of years ago, was the Extended Producer Responsibility Bill, which in easier terms means that we are holding producers of plastics and single-use plastics and other types of things that need to be recycled and that cause a lot of carbon emissions by going into our landfills, holding those producers responsible for actually being in charge of the recycling of the products that they create and that they put into our community, and making them pay their fair share and pay for bringing it back out and not actually emitting carbon. This is a huge game-changing program. I'm so excited for it because it's going to bring recycling to most of us in Lakewood. And so these are the types of really innovative programs I'm very excited to continue to work on, and where Colorado can continue to be a leader.
I want to go ahead and just read one of the questions from the Zoom chat, because it's kind of along these lines as well. How would you convince Governor Polis Polis's administration to better enforce air quality regulations? I'll start with you.
That's a great question. It's unfortunate because Governor Polis ran on being someone who is a champion for the environment, and I'm not totally sure that he always has lived up to that. Actually our current state representative has done a lot of really good work on the air quality standards, and we need to do more and start to create more teeth through legislation to actually hold these polluters accountable. We were talking about Suncor, and you can't donate your way out of responsibility for the havoc that you are wreaking in communities like that they reside in. I think that we need to, if the governor can't enforce the laws that we have on the books, then we need to put more teeth into the laws and start actually requiring these polluters.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I've worked very closely with the governor's office on a lot of bills. And he's got a very clear vision of what he wants to do, and he's got incredibly competent staff who I have close relationships with and have sometimes worked very well with. But he does do what he wants to do, and there's not often a lot of persuading. And so on some of these issues, unfortunately, what we need to be doing is making sure that the next governor of our state is with us before we throw endorsements in. And get some actual commitments about what we're going to expect from partnership with the governor's office, because we have not always had that. And it has been very discouraging to have some of the bills that I've worked very hard on that would create more equity and access and health for these communities be vetoed. I'll also say, we have an air toxin polluter in our community, supporting my opponent. In my neighborhood, putting air toxins into the air that my daughter breathes, who fought tooth and nail against any, not even regulations, but just testing of the air around our neighborhood. And so, like, this is near and dear to my heart, and we don't make change if we keep doing the same thing.
If you could go.
9 minutes done.
Thank you so much. On to our next speaker, our next question.
Are you ready? And my question is, Rebekah, how can you help people in the state of Colorado with health issues and housing when you are able to help me with housing and health issues in Rebekah?
Can you repeat the question?
Connie asked how Rebekah can you help Coloradans with mental health issues, with health issues, and housing issues, not able to help Connie.
We know each other quite well from the Lakewood City Council. A big commitment that I made when you came to me was to connect you with somebody who I thought was going to be able to better serve your needs. And that was an advocate that we had at the state level, because a lot of the issues that you were struggling with were actually issues around habitability and access and affordable housing that were regulated by the state. So the opportunity to serve our community at the state with the type of experience that I have, having worked as a Medicaid provider and a music therapist for kids and adults with disabilities my entire life, is a huge piece of who I am and what I bring to the table. We need more people from helping professions who are serving in office, who haven't just been in politics their whole life, but who have real world experience actually helping people and understanding the needs of the communities that we serve at the state level.
If you could, Ms. Kennedy, she'd also like you to answer more broadly how you plan to help us with health concerns given the cost.
Yeah, you know, it's crazy actually how horribly we fund disability work in the state. You know, it's shocking actually. And like I mentioned before, when budget cuts happen, do you know where they come from? Do you know who we cut first? Like, makes me want to cry. It's like the folks who actually need the most from us, we are the quickest to write off because their issues are the most complicated. And funding isn't going to solve your problem, right? So I'm not just arguing that we need to throw more money at the disability community, though we do need to throw more money at the disability community. But we actually have to think, you know, I think often what we say when we say someone has a disability is we see someone in a wheelchair, we see a physical disability. And sometimes that's the case, right? And sometimes that's not the case. There are tons and tons of people who are experiencing invisible disabilities and other kinds of disabilities. And when we only have one lens with which we see a person and how to help them, we don't help any people. And so again, I think this comes back to the systems change work. Like, we really need to build a system that puts you in the center and addresses your housing needs first, and then gives you all of the wraparound support that you need in order to thrive. And it's going to cost money and it's going to be hard, but I'm in for the hard work.
Hey ladies, public service, I know you love this. We have taken a beating on our social security. And now we want to take our paper money from us. And some of these people rely on that paper check coming back. We had a 7% increase in cost of living. I want to know how much money can we afford to give you, the state, and survive?
It's a complicated question. And I hear the pain that you're experiencing with economic mobility, right? And I think that, you know, the point of the progressive income tax is not actually to take your TABOR refunds. It's to redistribute the wealthiest and corporate degree, frankly, to folks like you who are struggling. And so, my intention as a legislator and as a policymaker is always to create systems that help folks who are furthest from help, who need the most. And what it sounds like to me is that you're needing economic mobility. And so I actually think that even though we're not seeing eye to eye ideologically, from a policy perspective, a progressive income tax is actually going to benefit you in a way that a TABOR refund, which historically has been very, very low until the last couple of years where we actually have made major changes in order to do more progressive refunds, have been very small. So I sort of challenged the question that we're taking money away, when in fact actually the proposal is to support you better.
Yeah, I agree. Until a couple of years ago, we all got TABOR refunds that reflected our income bracket and how much money we had paid in taxes, which means that the wealthier folks in Colorado got a larger refund than folks who didn't make as much money. And until a couple of years ago, when we all started getting flat refunds, which is much more progressive and actually supports folks who we want to support, that helped kind of solve that problem. And the idea of a progressive income tax does the same thing. It makes folks at the top pay their fair share and make sure that folks like us who sometimes struggle to make ends meet, are not paying as much because we don't make as much.
Hi, my name is Stewart, ladies. Full transparency, I don't live in this district, but if you were, I live in Greenland, and I am a Jefferson County resident. Yeah, he was. But nonetheless, if the election were tomorrow, and I strongly believe, yes, you represent this district, but clearly you're in the Colorado State House, correct? Okay. So if the election were tomorrow, here is my question. As you know, I have been circulating a letter created by Representative deGruy, who will be your colleague, with the current and former elected officials, urging our federal delegation to support a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. If you can applaud for me, sorry for the question. Serious. Thank you. If elected, would you add your name in support of permanent ceasefire in Gaza? If yes, why? And if no, why not? And then I have a follow-up depending on your response, if that's okay.
I think that's okay. Yes, we do have limited time, but if you can ask the question.
There is no way to look at what is happening in Gaza and not be horrified and see that the U.S. government needs to use all available leverage that we have to make sure that civilians are safe and that kids are safe. I have advocated to our congressional delegation personally to do just that, to do everything that we possibly can. My concern with signing on to things that were drafted by other people is that it's not something that I got to say myself. Yes, I would consider it, but I care very deeply in this particular situation about being utterly responsible for the words that I use and being responsible for the things that I say and wanting to take ownership over that. So yes, I would consider it.
So I think I've signed on to that letter and have called for a permanent ceasefire. And I have a lot of Jewish friends who are feeling really scared right now. And I've also spent a lot of time talking with the communities of folks who are experiencing not just fear, but PTSD from a Holocaust that was not very long ago. And so this is a deeply sensitive issue, and it's a deeply sensitive issue to a lot of communities, and also we are funding a genocide in Gaza. And yesterday morning because I read the news in the morning because I want my life to feel horrible. I turned on the news and on my phone, I turned it on, like I watch TV news, I looked at my phone and saw this picture of these torsos of babies and we're funding that.
I think we have time for a follow-up.
Excellent. And the follow-up actually is from Councilperson Rebekah. You said that you would not want to sign on to anything that's written by someone else. Please, write something yourself. If you are so committed to this, as you continue to say you are, please write something yourself, circulate it, forward it to the electeds in Washington, D.C. So you, honestly, you know, like, running for office is about putting your money where your mouth is. I've done it, right? As you know. So I would encourage you to do that, because think about the fact that if the election were tomorrow, you'd still be waiting to write that letter.
All right, next question.
Before I introduce myself, I would like to thank the previous person for asking that question. I think it's incredibly important, and I want to know what our representatives think. Moving on, my name is deGruy. Thank you both for your time today. It's been incredibly insightful to hear perspectives. I am a little concerned, particularly to Rebekah, that you did not proactively mention race when explaining why, the reason for these issues and your solution to these issues. I think from my recollection, you mentioned it in response when you were rebuttal. And I think that all of us want legislators that don't shy away from uncomfortable questions, and especially about issues like race, because those policies impact and benefit all of us. And so, in that vein, can you specifically, I want both of you to answer this, mention any past experience, not just voting record, but actual coalition work and community work that is directly relevant to addressing systems of inequities that not just disadvantage, but target Black and brown Coloradans, undocumented Coloradans, and immigrant Coloradans, and demonstrate that you have actually heard these people, that sometimes that there are competing priorities when working on these issues. I would like to hear from you, but of course, Kyra, while you did name a number of racial equity coalition work, I would still like to hear any experience you have mentioned.
Please, we have to close up.
The question portion is just,
Yeah. I think both of you have kind of understood the question, but she's wanting you to explain your actual actions taken when it comes to coalition work in regard to Black and brown Coloradans. Does that help? Okay, all right.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. I actually work at a nonprofit organization right now that works with young people and works to dismantle the white supremacist systems that our entire culture is built around in America. And one of the coalitions that we're working in right now is the Colorado Reproductive Healthcare Reproductive Health for All initiative, which is a coalition that is comprised of organizations like Soul to Soul Sister, like Color, and many, many others that are looking at the issue of reproductive healthcare access and reproductive justice with a lens of anti-racism and racial equity, because we know that there are more access issues for communities of color and low-income communities, and making sure that we are doing the work to actually support access that is equitable and make sure that those voices are leading, not just at the table, but are the ones leading the coalition and leading the work. So I'm really proud to be part of that. Thank you for the question.
I mean, we've worked in a lot of coalitions together, so I think you know, but for the rest of the folks here, I think my job being a white woman that appears the way that I appear, which is super white, right? Like, I fit in with white folks, is to show up as an accomplice, right? And not just to say, like, and I'm not saying that to be clear, this is not an attack. Not to just be an ally, not to just show up to the spaces, but to build the spaces with the intention of lifting up voices of color, because the folks who don't look like me have been dealing with being sidelined and silenced and not valued for as long as we've been people. And so it's my responsibility to not just make space for that, but to invite it and to look at my own resistance and to look at my own internalized racism and to understand the system in which I was born and help other people experience walking through that and feel safe in talking about their own internalized racism and sorting through how do we fix this problem that is the foundation of so many of our systemic issues in this country. So I think it's the North Star for all the work that I do.
I don't have a question, I do have a statement. When I heard about this for the pending, however, I would suggest that you tell us what you can do for us, how you can make lives better for us and our children. Don't waste time criticizing one another for accepting campaign donations from somebody that you would agree with. Thank you.
We do have 2 other questions on Zoom, if we could make the answers very quick though. One, what do you know about ranked choice voting? Would you support the RCP initiatives, which may be on the 2024 ballot?
I know quite a bit about ranked choice voting, and I think that ranked choice voting works under specific circumstances, but not all circumstances. And it works in some elections, but not all elections. And I think this is the place where people get it gets tied up for folks, because what we see in California is in a jungle primary with ranked choice voting, we have lots of Republicans who actually make it onto the ballot even though they don't have the support of the folks that are in the communities. And so I think, at a local level, we absolutely should be doing ranked choice voting, 100%. And it should have been done in Lakewood, and we have the ability to do that here, and I wish that it was happening. And I know that that has been a proposal that has been proposed to Lakewood before, and they haven't picked it up. And I don't necessarily think that it fixes all of our voting rights issues. So it's sort of gray area, but mostly support.
For brevity, I would say I pretty much agree, and the only additional caveat is that we know that there are ballot access issues and voting rights issues, especially in communities of color and low-income communities where we see less engagement in our electoral process, and I would want to make sure that any change in the way that we vote comes with a great deal of public engagement and education, because we don't want any sort of drop-off in people's, I think, really sacred ability to vote in our elections.
And the final question, which we could probably be here for a while, what is your plan to eliminate TABOR? If that is, I think, the basis of your answers.
Good luck.
2 minutes.
I'm just going to say we need to look at a progressive income tax first.
I've been a part of a lot of the coalitions over the years that have been trying to get rid of TABOR. And I obviously am already running on the plan of doing a progressive income repeal of TABOR. There's a lot of things that need to happen first, and a lot of it's organizing, and a lot of it's fundraising, and a lot of it's community engagement, and a lot of it's education, and it may not be possible in this state. It's really hard to say. I think the way that we have fixed TABOR a lot of times over the years has complicated getting rid of it, and so we need to put a lot of really smart brains in the same room and fund them to run a campaign to do this if we're going to do a full-scale repeal.
Right, and we did have one more person waiting in line.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Hold to get the questions. I believe I saw you last year between April and May. I went to a city council meeting, and this is a correspondence between myself and the district court. I'm filing a civil lawsuit. I asked you what you were going to do about police brutality, about my mother being abducted and murdered, and you never answered. Can you answer that question now?
Sure.
Pictures, there's video, everything we prove on every website.
Yeah, I'm not going to comment on this specific issue, but as far as police brutality, we in Lakewood, I'm actually really proud to say, have increased the co-responder program very significantly since I've been on council. We have over doubled the amount of mental health co-responders. We have actually partnered with Jefferson County to provide primary care as well, so that we're actually providing the services that people in our community need and are not overburdening our sworn officers with issues that frankly, they're not always the right people to deal with, so.
If you'd like to respond to the question about police brutality.
Sure. It's unconscionable, really, that folks that are sworn to protect us are in some cases murdering us, especially the black and brown ones of us. And that's not to say that every police officer is murdering black and brown folks, right? But when it happens, there do need to be accountability measures put in place.
When it's caught on video, it is.
Absolutely, yes. And when it's caught on video.
Ask the mayor.
Yeah, I'm with you. You know, I think we worked in the coalition to pass the police accountability bill a number of years ago, and I think there have been some changes and there are some fixes that still need to happen there. But the fact that black and brown folks are scared to pull over when they get pulled over is a cultural and systemic issue. It's not an issue with individual cops. This is an issue with the way that we do policing in this country, and it needs to be reformed.
All right, if we could move on to closing statements, and we will end the night vote. I believe Rebekah says
Well, thank you all so much for coming. Thank you so much to Lloyd and the rest of our volunteers for organizing this event. We both really appreciate the opportunity, to Madison and Amber and Christine and Lloyd, and to our wonderful moderator. Thank you so much for being here as well. We really appreciate the opportunity.